Hi, this is Tim Allen for the FlintCreekCourier.com, and today we are in the home of Wayne Hale, and he is the independent write-in candidate for the Granite County Commissioner here in is it District 3, is that correct?
That's correct.
So and he'll be running against Bart Bonney, and who is the incumbent this year, and then George Hinkle, who's the Republican. I guess, no, George Hinkle is the independent, I guess. He ran as independent. No, he ran as a Republican, as a Republican candidate. So Wayne, you know, running as a write-in is a daunting task. So you're kind of asking people here to find a way to do something more than just punch a hole in a ballot.
Right.
So let's talk about your background a little bit first. How long have you been here? What's your experience here in Granite County?
You know, I started as a young kid working in Puyallup, Washington, working on a farm. And so, you know, I grew up working on a farm up until age 18, and then went off to university at Western Washington University there in Bellingham, and got a degree in chemistry. Just out of that, I started working in the metals industry with Kaiser Aluminum, and actually came out of university and right into a supervisor job.
Wow. Working
24/7 on a shift work, and so, you know, a number of times at 2 o'clock in the morning I asked myself, why did I go to university? But I learned more in that time as a shift supervisor than I have in other time of how to understand people, how to understand their concerns, and how to address their concerns appropriately within the values continuum that we all have. And so with that, then I moved up in the ranks from supervisor to superintendent to manager to plant manager. And then in that process, worked across the United States in 5 different states, and also worked internationally in Europe and Russia, Australia, New Zealand, and several other places. But with that, I found that each one of those places were culturally different, and I had to morph myself into understanding what was required to make sure that we could do the appropriate thing for each one of those areas.
That seems like a pretty valuable piece of experience, considering Granite County has really got kind of a suburban feel in Phillipsburg and a much more rural feel when you go out toward Drummond and Maxwell and Hall. That seems like something that would serve you well.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, is that you have to understand the constituency, and that, in this case, the people in the county, as you'd have to understand in business, whether it was a board member or the people in a plant, what their needs are and what their concerns are. And with that, then you can tune yourself appropriately to what their requirements are, communicate appropriately, and make sure that you meet their needs. That's the most important thing.
So I guess when you look at this, and of course, before we go on, your wife has a business in Drummond. She runs the Cotton Patch, and you guys have some plans for, I guess, a quilting retreat, which I didn't really know was a thing, but I guess is a thing.
Yep.
And it sounds like that's going to look really cool when you guys get to the development part of that. So why be involved in this? What's your kind of overview of why you want to be involved in Granite County politics in the commission's office?
Well, you know, I'm a passionate person, and so I have sat in on some of the commission meetings. I've listened to people in the community on what their concerns are, and certainly with some of the recent occurrences within the commission as far as demonstration of poor ethics and poor values, you know, I'm at a point that enough is enough. Someone has to do something differently and provide something differently to redirect how that commission is working. And so when I listen to that, even though I missed the primary, I threw my hat in the ring because I feel I bring something different than the other candidate. I bring a passion that I don't see in those candidates as well. And I deliver a sense of urgency and a need to get things done.
When you say a sense of urgency, what are maybe some immediate things that you see that the county needs to address? I mean, are there 1 or 2 things that you can kind of just right off the top?
Well, I think the basic thing is engendering trust again in the public, because what we've seen certainly in the last year. The behaviors that we've seen demonstrated have engendered mistrust and opaqueness in communication. So foundationally, I believe communication is important, and it's a bilateral communication, not only one way communicating to the public, but also listening to the public on what their issues are and what the concerns are, and internalizing those in the decisions that you make. And so that would be one of the first things that we work on is making sure that people have a great means of communicating to us and also the other way as well.
Okay, and yeah, and so we talked a little bit about one of your points being transparency. You also kind of touched on the ethical nature of the commission. Can you maybe explain a little bit more about that and maybe some of the things you seen that need to be addressed?
Yeah, I mean, without going into detail, obviously we've seen some misappropriation of funds and equipment for private use of one of the commissioners, and that is just unacceptable. I mean, the public pays taxes and expects the commissioners to use those tax monies appropriately on their behalf to manage the county, when in fact this is being done inappropriately. That sends the wrong message to the public that how the commissioners work. And so ethics are a big deal to me, and it starts with trust and honesty and dignity and respect and love, and those all have to be demonstrated to make sure that people understand that the commissioners are working on their behalf rather than themselves. So
another point you had was the fiscal responsibility of the county. How do you? There are always opinions about, well, we should spend it here versus spend it there. I know, from my experience living in Southern California, it was always, well, when you pay in tax dollars, all the tax money went to the roads in LA and never went to my little town out in the desert. How do you look at balancing those kind of issues here?
Well, certainly, as you'd expect, I've gone through the budget now of the county, and I find some things that are different than what I've seen in the past in running a business. And so there's a lot of questions I have that I would ask in how we allocate the money appropriately or inappropriately, and so definitely I would be questioning how things are budgeted, and also having people held to account to the budget. Right now, the process doesn't allow a public review of the budget, and so it's developed. I would expect, though, that when a budget is developed, that the managers of the various elements of the county are held to account by standing and delivering and talking to their budget and the variances from the previous year with the public, so that the public understands why things are being done the way they are and why the money is being spent.
So let's back up there just a little bit, because you said something that I wasn't aware of, is that there's no public review of the budget.
Well, there is. Here's it's quite an unusual process. The budget is development, and the books or the budget is placed out on public display at the courthouse on a table, and the public can come in and review those, but there's no time allocated for the public to actually ask questions of the various managers of the various departments. And
one of the things that I know I've had voiced to me as a frustration is that there's, again, a lot of this county's residency is rural, and for them to carve 2 or 3 hours out of their day to come down and try and decipher a budget and
right.
books isn't very accessible to them.
Yeah.
So are there some ways you can think of? I mean, if you were on there now, how would you look at trying to make that more accessible?
Well, that's a good point, is that right now the commissioners have one meeting a week. And I don't believe that's, to your point, provides appropriate accessibility to the general public. And so I would propose that we develop a meeting schedule that meets the needs of the public rather than the needs of the commissioners. And so whether it's 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 2 hours at a time, I would be open to public opinion on how we should organize the meetings that would befit them.
Or maybe even at night.
Exactly.
Because some of these ranchers, to lose 3 hours in the middle of the only daylight they've got is kind of...
I would be willing to meet in the evening from 6 to 10. I would be willing to meet on the weekends if that were required. I would be available and promote commission availability 24/7 because that's who we should be. We work on behalf of the public, and therefore we should be available to them 24/7.
So, one of the things that I think would be a concern is if you get voted in, with the current commission, and there does seem to be some disgruntled attitude with the way they've handled things, you'd be one voice among three.
Right.
So even with a lot of the things that you want to do that sound like great ideas, how do you get those implemented? Or if they just continually vote you down, how do you try and change that tide?
Well, certainly my experience has required me to build coalitions, whether it was within boards or within a unionized group, or whether it was within a plant or even a community. I've met many times opposition, but I'm willing to work through coalitions to influence opinions, whether it was with the different commissioners or with the public. And so I believe I could work appropriately with the other commissioners to alter their opinions, perhaps. And if that were not the case, then I would work on the public opinion and build a coalition to them, with them, so they could voice their opinion at the various meetings and help change those other opinions that the commissioners have.
Does that, I think some of the concern right now is that the voices of people are not really being heard. So while I think what you're saying is right, is that actually something that, do you think that would actually happen with the two that would be left?
Well, I think I'm always an advocate of consistency, and so if we can win, we have a public opinion that's consistent and monumental in its in amount and volume. I believe that would impact the other commissioners' thoughts and process.
So I think probably more than any other candidate that I've seen locally in at least recent history that I've been here, you have a website, and what is your website?
It's wrhale.com.
Okay, so you can go there. I know you've got a lot of detail in there about things that you want to see done and what you believe some of your platforms should be to be successful. So we would encourage people to go there. Is there anything else? Anything else? I mean, one of the things that I know that I've heard a lot from people is, this county used to have a very significant logging presence. That is almost non-existent except for one or two companies now.
Right.
Is there any way you can see helping change that with the environmental groups and that always seem to get in the way of that thing?
Well, I think there are a couple of ways we can look at that. I think partnering with the Forest Service more directly in regards to lands that perhaps have been impacted by forest fires. Those lands can be opened up for logging. Partnering with them by building roads into those areas and then allowing bidding of that logging for the local community would be beneficial. So that would be, I think, a first element. And of course, there's the discussion on whether we open these lands or close these lands for public use. I think I have an opinion that perhaps we need a little bit more public review of that rather than a commissioner discussion on how they should or should not open or close those lands. So I would advocate definitely a public review of that before the commissioners make any decision on that type of
It seems to me that a lot of what you're advocating might, to a degree, slow down the process because of the amount of public input that you want to have.
Right.
Does that seem like a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that's I believe, because we are working on behalf of the constituency of the public, we need to have that opinion and ability to hear their voice. If it takes a little bit longer, so be it. But at the end of the day, when that happens, we will have that opinion and represent that opinion in decisions.
Let me ask you this. Now, this is always kind of a tough spot that I think representatives at any level find. How do you look at, if your constituency here in this 3rd district, which is, I think, mostly Georgetown Lake and this kind of southern end of the county, if they had a belief on a certain issue, and you really got that maybe 80 or 90% wanted to go one way, and you really didn't think that was the way to go,
right.
How do you vote that issue? How do you present that issue to the commissioner?
Well, again, I think you are in that position as a result of public opinion and public support. And so while my personal values or personal opinion may be counter to what the public wants. I have to really consider what the public wants and needs. This is very similar to any business or any other things that you do. When the board, say a board of directors directs you and wants you to do something, your personal opinion might be something different, but again, they are advising you on how they want to run the company, and therefore you have to ascribe to their wishes and do so accordingly without your personal values getting in the way. Same thing here. I've been voted in to office by the public, and their opinions are very important in how I manage my own behaviors. Yes, I can provide my own opinions and my own thoughts, but at the end of the day, I have to represent them.
So are there instances in that case where maybe as a commissioner you have more information than the public and you see the need to actually vote against that? How do you go about conveying that? How do you go about doing that?
It would be through special communication sessions, town hall meetings within the community, which I don't see right now. That's again one of the things I hear from the public is that how do we know what's going on unless we go to the meetings or read the notes? And I would be an advocate of certainly if there's an issue that needs public review and thought to help me understand what the issues are and what the concerns are, I'd have town hall meetings across my district so that I would get sufficient information to make the appropriate decision.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to add on your candidacy? Anything, maybe just a closing thought or anything?
Well, I do understand being a write-in candidate is an uphill battle.
Absolutely.
However, I believe getting out in front of the public, communicating appropriately, helping you all understand who I am and what I stand for and my experience, you'll understand that when you approach that ballot, and you'll find that filling in that box and writing in Wayne Hale will be the best decision you've ever made, because we will change the way we do our work here. We will change your thought on and feeling on how the commissioners have done their work. And while it may be a slow ship turning, the ship will turn and we will be better for it.
All right. Well, Wayne, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Again, Wayne Hale running as an independent, and he is a write-in candidate. So if you've heard some things today that you really like, if you see some things on his website, or you get to meet Wayne out in the community and at one of his meet and greets or something like that, he'll also be at the forum on the 11th, I believe. That's going to be at the Granite County Museum at October 11th at 6:30 p.m. He will be one of the people there. I'm sure some of the other local candidates and hopefully some of our statewide candidates will be there as well, if we're fortunate enough for that. But if you've liked those things, in Wayne's case, you're going to have to make a little bit of extra effort to actually write his name in once you check that box. So thanks again for your time. For the FlintCreekCourier.com, this is Tim Allen. That's it.
Thank you. Well, thank you.
Let's see here.